Hi, hello, welcome back. It's Aaron, funnily enough, because it's my channel. I'm here to review another classic Doctor Who story. Who would have thought? It is The Mysterious Planet, which is the first 4 episodes of The Trial of a Time Lord. Now, I know it's one full season and there's an overarching title, but I personally recognise them as separate stories. Also, I just prefer using their individual titles than calling it Trial of a Time Lord Part 1, Trial of a Time Lord Part 2, you know. It's just easier. And especially like Terror of the Vervoids has basically nothing to do with the plot at all, really. It just sort of introduces Mel and is also like, oh, and now we're gonna book the Doctor for genocide. Um so yeah, The Mysterious Planet is the first part. It is not great. So I haven't got my laptop with me because my sister's having to use it for homeschooling. So I'm not going to be able to give you the names of all the characters, and it's a really boring, forgettable story. Especially the second half, it's just, oh, for goodness sake, let it go. So I'm just going to be addressing them by their names, like the Queen, played by the nice lady out of Carry On, the annoying twins, the turncoat one who you think is evil but's actually good, but and doesn't actually get much backstory as to why they're good. Anyway, so the Sixth Doctor and Peri arrive on Ravalox, and they're like, oh, I wonder where this is. And then pretty early on in the story, they realise it's Earth. And it's basically like Orphan 50, people haven't seen this story, it's like the Orphan 55 twist, but it just happens really early on. And then it's like, well, how did Earth come to be here? What happened to it? I can't remember how far in the future this is. It's quite far in the future. Is it? I can't remember. I feel like it's quite far in the future. But it becomes basically they get caught up in the locals, as usually happens. They get caught up with all the locals. The Sixth Doctor gets captured by Drathro and his loyal subjects who think he's some kind of magician, wizard thing, god, I guess, as well. And then Peri gets taken by Carry On Queen and her sort of little tribe of people who went upstairs and were like, we're gonna live outside, fuck you, Drathro. And on the way she meets Sabalon Glitz and his partner, who I quite liked, but his partner doesn't appear in The Ultimate Foe or Dragonfire, so it just seems that Sabalon just went his own way, I guess. But yeah, I like them too. I like them as a double act, actually. I guess I'll start with them, why not? Sabalon was very entertaining, despite, he's not a nice character, but he's not a downright evil person. And I quite like those kind of characters. And in this one, he's very entertaining. I think he has a great chemistry with his partner, who I assumed was going to die because I knew that he didn't go on to the further episodes where Sabalon was in, or with the further episode that Sabalon was in, so don't know what happened to him. And the Carry On Queen, she was alright, but she didn't have much of a character. She kept switching from being somewhat reasonable to being unreasonable. And then when she dies, it's like, oh, okay, there, she's dead. The Doctor and Peri are good in it because it's Colin Baker and Nicola Bryant, you know. But I feel like Peri in particular doesn't get an awful lot to do. I like the bit where she sort of is very conflicted after learning what's happened to her planet. She doesn't feel great. So that was interesting, I guess. Was it L3? Was his designation? Or was it L1? I think it was an L3. I don't know, but his name was Drathro. And I feel like there wasn't enough talk about him. They have a lot of mysteries to what he is and where he comes from. But he was, somewhat entertaining, as a villainous presence. It looked decent. I liked the bits outside in particular. It was just a bit plodding along. The second half is worse than the first half because I think a lot of these kind of stories, once they lose the charm of like sort of, oh, we're getting to see new people, new characters, new places, there's just nothing, there's nowhere else for the story to go. And I really think, honestly, if this had been really, really shortened and really confined to what the basics of the story were, you could have got it over with 2 parts. Honestly, it could have been the same size as The Ultimate Foe. I guess this is like a nice little mini review because it's not very long at all. It's just so blah. Like, as a rating, I'd give it 5.5 out of 10 because it's not irredeemably awful, but it's just, there's nothing to talk about. Like, this review is so short because there's nothing to talk about. It's a really weak opening to this season arc. I think it's a shame that this is Robert Holmes' last full story, like full script, because he didn't finish Ultimate Foe. I think the trial, out of all the stories, apart from the Ultimate Foe, which kind of switches everything on its head, of the first 3 stories in the season, I think this one, you see the most stuff about the court and the trial, and it's an interesting premise, I think. But and I think the Valiard is a great character. I think he's really well played. So is the Inquisitor. Like, I actually like all the Time Lords here, and I think the Time Lords are often a very boring species, to be honest. So especially in the classic series, so I quite liked them here. And of all the stories, they keep on like coming out of it, but because this was the first piece of evidence, the Doctor constantly interrupting makes sense because he's still like, what the hell am I doing here? So yeah, I think that bit works here. But I think honestly this is very lucky that it has the trial, because if it didn't have the trial with it, I think it would be even lower. I think 5.5 is a pretty decent score for it. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, like, subscribe, hit the bell. My hair looks decent today. Oh.